Thank you.
All right, we're going to go live. It's preparing to live stream the meeting. Hello. Thank you, everyone who's here live today. My name's Veronica. I am the Assistant Director in Programming at the Omega Institute, and we are with best-selling author, speaker, and movement expert, Katy Bowman. Katy has an educational company called Nutritious Movement, and she teaches globally about movement ecology and sedentarism, which is something that we can definitely all relate to after being in quarantine and working from home. She has written 8 books, including the groundbreaking Move Your DNA and Movement Matters. And today, in celebration of Get Outdoors Day, this weekend, we'll be talking about her latest book, Grow Wild, which I have right here. Grow Wild, the Whole Child, Whole Family Nature-Rich Guide to Moving More. Katy will be offering an Omega Teacher Studio online workshop on Wednesday, November 3rd from 6 to 8 Eastern, and she'll be taking any questions that you may have today. Welcome, Katy, and tell us about Grow Wild and how getting outside actually helps our bodies.
Oh, well, thanks for having me and to talk about my favorite thing, which is not just moving, but moving outside. And yeah, why is it so important? Well, I think in Move Your DNA, what I was trying to show is the difference between moving inside and moving outside is on one hand quite easy to understand because you're simply moving more. So you don't even have to figure out like why it's just better because there's more of the thing that you want when you go out there, even if the thing that you do inside is somewhat identical to what you're doing outside. So imagine if you go for a walk on something flat and level inside, maybe a treadmill inside, which is, probably a way that many people were able to still keep up moving when they couldn't go anywhere else, which is great. But if you take that same number of steps outside, what do you have now that's different than when you were inside? You've got, one, the shape of the ground is not consistently exactly the same. It's lumpy, it's bumpy, it's textured. And so it ends up moving more of your body parts. It ends up making not more movement in the sense of a greater number of steps, but more parts have to move for those number of steps. And then you've got the temperature variance, like your physiology has to deal with regulating other things like temperature and weather and wind. So it's like a greater sensory experience. Like you have to spend more energy to do that same amount of walking. So it's more what I like to say movement nutrient dense when you take things outside. Then there's chemicals that come out of the trees that greatly benefit humans. And then there's the fact that your eyeballs can move differently outside than they can when everything's so up close to your face. So it's just more parts of you get a chance to move when you're outside. And so even if we just kept it at that level, there's just more movement, more complex movement to be found out there. I can't hear you anymore. I think you're still muted, maybe.
You're right. I was muted, but I was saying that makes total sense. And I was reading in your book too about, you wrote something about how are diapers clothing or are they furniture? Yeah. Which I would love for you to expand on.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's such it comes from a complex section of the book where I've explained really how the environment shapes us. So we don't really think about, you think of like, I'm exercising or I'm not exercising. But another way to look at it is really your body is always adapting to what you're doing physically. So if you sit in a chair at work or at home for 6 hours, you were just doing the chair exercise program is all. Meaning I know that if I lift a weight or do a pose, that what I'm attempting to do is get my body to strengthen to be able to do that pose better, or certain muscles that are able to handle the pose end up developing. And so when you are in furniture, you're sort of exercising in this way. And then clothing is another example. Like if you put on a tight belt or tight pants, which maybe none of us have done since we transitioned to working all from home, right? There's like we have this sense of like there's professional clothes, but professional clothes don't allow us to sit comfortably on the floor or, you know, recline in bed and work on our laptop. Why? These clothing, these elements of what we wrap our bodies in are restricting our movement. And so in this section in Grow Wild, I'm talking specifically about hip formation, because hips take years to sort of set their shape, but we're doing it in an environment where we are wrapping our thighs in something as infants. And so is that a furniture or is that clothing? I would just say it is part of the shape making structures that we are regularly surrounding ourselves within.
Yeah, that's incredible. Actually, when I was reading your book as a parent, I mean, my son's 16 already, and I always kept thinking, wow, if I could go back again and do it this way. So I imagine a lot of families might think that with this, but
well, that's what Move Your DNA is for. I mean, there's never going back on anything. Like we're so great at learning new things and incorporating it. My hope is that, and we're also all creating environments for children really all the time. So it's just sort of understanding like, oh, I know where I came from, right? You could read that book as an adult going, I was once a child, and it's just all we are even as adults, even as older adults, we're much more malleable than we understand. So like all hope is not lost.
Yeah. So I would love for you to talk more about how movement is medicine.
Yeah, movement is like, you know, my daughter's been doing pottery. And so like when when you're playing with this wheel, like what are you doing? You're applying these outside forces, and you're creating a shape through those forces that you apply. And our body is quite similar. So the cells of our body are receiving these pressures that we're creating. And some of the pressures are through our physical action, you know, the fact that we are actively choosing to walk or bend over. But it is also, like I said, the more passive elements, the fact that the surfaces that we walk on are flat, and that there's, you know, no natural light in our spaces, and that even though there's something always within 20 feet to 20 inches in front of our face, kind of, I call it cast. It casts, we've casted our body in lots of different ways that are totally off of our radar, because everyone in our culture does them. And so it doesn't seem like there's an option or that there's this thing going on. So the idea of movement being medicine is that there are many ailments that relate directly to a lack of physical activity. And also there are many ailments for which symptom mitigation, like not only prevention, but actually after the issue is had, symptom mitigation is known to be exercise and other physical activities. So this idea that we have this ability to move to, I'll say medicine. There's some reasons that I don't like that analogy, but I think that when we're just trying to figure out, like, how do I generally feel better? How do I specifically feel better? Movement is often the answer. It's just that it's not always just move more. Sometimes, like if you go to physical therapy, and they're not going to say, you know, like you can have an athlete with an injury. Well, that person might move quite a bit, but it's not the total movement that they might be missing. It's this nuance to like, well, actually, every time you do the 10,000 steps,
Yeah.
Every 10,000 steps you're taking, because of this weakness that you have over here in your hip, these steps are actually what is hurting you. So it's not to get rid of the steps necessarily, but it's to learn a new form of the steps. So sometimes, just like nutrition, we are missing calories, and sometimes we are missing nutrients, non-caloric nutrients. Like sometimes, like, oh, you don't have enough fat in your diet. That would be a macronutrient. Or sometimes it's you don't have enough vitamin D in your diet. So with movement, it's the same way. Sometimes, and for many of us, for most of us, we're not getting enough total movement. But also, we are also missing, in the cases when we do get large meals of movement, they're still missing these critical micronutrients. And so that's really, I like to work on both of those levels. And it's where my love of alignment and understanding the form, why the form with which you move matters so much, because it's creating the equivalent to biochemistry in your cells. It's creating biochemistry in your cells, but you don't only eat for nutrients, you move for specific nutrients too.
That makes sense. Yeah, that is a perfect segue for you to tell us more about your Omega Teacher Studio, which is in November. It'll be November 3rd. And it's about the sustainable plank.
Sustainable plank.
Yes.
Yeah. So I tried to pick a move to learn the, what do I want to say? It's like not just the importance of how nuanced we can be when we move. It's how much control you have over how you do a movement when someone shows you how to move a lot of your parts. I don't think a lot of people have been shown. We come from a sedentary culture, as I say, sort of ad nauseum in Grow Wild. Indeed. So like we are in a sedentary culture, which means when we grew up, and as we are continuing to grow up, and as the generations beneath us grow up, you're not seeing a lot of movement role models. Like the movements that you end up picking up on are pretty few, and there's not really great movement elders who are giving you or passing down movement knowledge, right? Movement just sort of going away. And so when you're told to do a move and maybe you're given some elements of its form, maybe if you take a class, someone says, okay, we're going to do a plank. And you're looking at it, you're like, okay, it looks like my hands are down below my shoulders and then my feet are behind me, my knees are off the ground. Got it, right? So there's that level of form. But then there's like, maybe a teacher will say, well, actually, your hands aren't underneath your shoulders like I thought, like you thought they were. So bring them a little closer, bring them a little farther forward, farther back. Okay, now there's these other parts too. Where are your ribs? Where are your hips? And so you can have someone introduce you to not only parts of your body that you didn't know were adjustable by you in a move, but also how you could, by adjusting those parts, get more of what you want out of a move to occur. So why are you doing a plank in the first place? Well, some people would say, I'm doing a plank for core strength, or I'm doing a plank for shoulder strength, or I was told to do this move to rehabilitate my lower back. So we have sort of a general, or maybe I'm just doing it for general fitness. We have these general ideas, but a lot of times the form that we choose would be like, well, actually you right now in this plank are using so much elbow ligament that neither your shoulder or your core are able to participate. I'm a biomechanist, so I think in terms of leverage. So I'm saying right now, the leverages that you're generating are actually doing the opposite. You're like, it's like finding out it's something that you've been eating for a long time had no nutrients within it. It's like empty calories. So I'm trying to show you that, like how to play around. So now, people will say, I can't do a plank because of my wrist. I can't do a plank because of my shoulder. So I'm going to say, I'm going to show you then how to break it down so that you can build a plank up from the ground up to where you can do it, so that you don't have to then just be a body that like my wrist doesn't do anything or my shoulder doesn't do it. I can't do any. So I just stopped doing any exercises that use my shoulder, and I've switched to this exercise, which is great in the sense that you've figured out a way to keep moving. but it's problematic in the sense of, yeah, you need that shoulder to work. Like there's a lot of like, you might not need it for exercise, but by sort of ignoring or moving around the issue for a long enough period of time, now that shoulder can't do anything anymore, including getting dressed, you know, like things that are like you don't even think of as fitness, but are as activities of daily living. So what I like to do is help people, and I'm going to use the plank in this case, in this workshop that I'm doing. Like we're going to use the plank as a portal to understanding how we don't want to avoid the parts of our body that aren't able to move in a certain exercise. What we want to do is learn how to modify every exercise down to the point at which we can do it, and learn enough about the nuanced movements of our body so that we can safely build up the strength or whatever else is going on in the parts until we can do a version. Because with movement, it's always uphill, right? That's what makes it preventive. Like it's never easy, and it's only going to become more and more challenging to be able to do once things start bothering us. So it's just getting into the habit of going, there's a different way of doing this. It's not that the exercise perhaps isn't working for my body, so I want to get rid of that exercise. It's that the way I'm performing it has lost some of its nuance. So we're going to be spending, I think, a couple hours really, you know, looking at all the common parts of where what we do with our body when it is given something that's just slightly beyond what we can do right now, how to find just the right level of challenge so that we're always growing and not really ever degenerating. So that's why it's sustainable. It could be regenerative or it could be preservative, but either way, it's not going to take us down in a decline.
Nice. And I will just tell my students, because I teach fitness and we do planks all the time, that I'll definitely be doing the workshop myself so I can pass on the knowledge. And, you know, I'll definitely encourage them to sign up too. So we could all do it with you in November. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Because as you said, movement is important, and how, you know, getting outside helps our bodies. It also helps our communities and the world. Would you like to talk more about that? Like how getting outside can do that?
Well, I mean, I think we're facing multiple crises right now, and they all relate to sedentarism in like the most general, in I guess both the most general sense and the broadest sense, which is, and this is something that is covered more in Movement Matters, where we're talking about this concept of movement ecology. Like the world, like we take movement to work. Like our individual bodies take movement to work, right? Like, so you teach fitness, people understand, like we exercise because it helps circulation, right? Like we've got these parts that are trying to do these things and we need to be working with them. So movement is part of how our body works, but movement is also part of how communities work, right? Like it's part of the interaction between individuals getting from place to place. If we think about it, we use more ancestral populations of people, or even modern hunter-gatherers on the planet right now. Like being an animal on a planet requires sustenance. Well, we live in this very strange, very outlying condition of where you can bring anything that you need to you, like with this motion here, the swipe of a thumb can beckon, you know, food, education, entertainment, a home, a mate. It doesn't matter. You can find it all online now. And all of these used to be, they are still the biological driving forces. We still have the need for all of these things.
Right.
But that driving force used to get you out to go get the thing. So the consequence of setting up societies where I will sit here and not move and everything will come towards me, while it has some of its payoffs, also comes with that's where the movement went. Like if you are wondering where the movement went, that's where it went, because humans that have to move to subsist and still do on this planet right now, move way more than we do. And so when we don't move, we require very large infrastructures to support our sedentarism. And so like I was listening to, climate, I was listening to teenagers, young adults in climate crisis. Like we have this generation coming up who are extremely worried and feel like it's a problem sort of given to them. And like, what do we do about it? And so like one simple thing is like, are you hanging your laundry to dry? Like, because I think that we get into crises when there's these seemingly insurmountable problems and there's like literally no action that you can imagine taking because it seems so big. But yet, if you could just start with something small, like, well, why are we all using a dryer all the time? Like we value sustainability and we value ecological action. And you also wanted some more movement. You were wondering, why are my steps per day down to nothing? It's like, well, go hang something out on the line. So like I think we have a challenging time seeing ourselves in how we individually are making a system, like are depending on this system or are using it. So it's just an easy way of stepping outside of it. And then you can be like, oh, me, not necessarily exercising, but me moving for the thing that I need is a type of eco action that has multiple levels of payoff. It still benefits me individually. If you have children watching you do it, children are like, oh, this is a valid way of doing laundry, something we all clothe ourselves. Like this is a way of participating in the world. And now I've learned it. I've been handed down that knowledge. I've participated. It's also outside time. We don't think of nature as go hang your laundry. Like we want the fun nature time, but humans need to wash and dry their clothes. And the sun is a free source of energy. It just requires movement and, HOA permission, or some other human artifice controlling thing there. But like that's why I'm saying that we have yet to really understand that our individual state of not being really aware of how to move for what we need, like how that's really part of these bigger issues that we're working on as a society.
Yeah, in your book, you also do talk about how, yes, we're here, we're having the world come to us, but it's not like us, depending on this means that we're not doing anything to harm the environment. It's like the people who have to gather the materials to make it and do all that stuff. It does make it clear how, you are changing the world and society by what you do. So it's a great, inspiring book, and I definitely encourage folks to buy it and to check it out and to learn more about you and your work. And we're thrilled to have you and have you part of our online Omega Teacher Studio. Let me see if there's anyone who is reacting on the live community. Don't see anyone, at least on my link, who's here with any questions or reactions. I guess we can just end with one of the things that I do like you referring to in this book is how we as humans are like indoor plants.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to, what I'm most known for doing, or maybe it's a tool that I just use that other people aren't tuning in to me doing it. But when I try to teach a lesson about humans and movement, I will almost always use a non-human example because, like I said, I'm a biomechanist. Biomechanist is someone who studies the mechanics, the forces on living things. So humans are just one living thing. All living things respond quite similarly to forces, to external forces. And so when you talk about something that's not human, it allows you to sort of step outside of maybe your ego or your culture to clearly get the lesson. So there's probably a lot of people planting seedlings into the ground right now. That's that time of year.
Yes.
And so if you're comfortable with plants, you're like, yes, of course. Like you can't take window seedlings and throw them into the ground. Or if you're experienced enough and you've tried it a lot of ways, you'll find that those don't do as well as seedlings that after they've come up inside are really spending some of their time outside. They're being stroked or moved. They're experiencing the wind. They're bending around a little bit. They're getting a little cold, because these they change the anatomy of the plant so that it can survive without the greenhouse. It's part of, like, these outside forces are what make for robust beings that then can be productive and then, drop their offspring and continue to go on. So I use that for children to say what we have are we've sort of become really a greenhouse population. Like, we thrive inside, and then our perspective, and sort of rightly so, on the outside is how dangerous it is, because it can be quite dangerous for something that has spent 40 years inside a greenhouse. Like, trees need to experience the wind, or else they can't really survive outside, because part of how trees work in an environment is like, oh, there's always going to be a easterly wind. I'm going to have to lay my roots down in opposition. I'm going to have to branch this way so that I'm building myself in response to this environment to be successful in this environment. There's invaluable information in the physical forces that come to our body that inform us how to develop so that we are robust and can withstand them. So when things grow up inside, they've missed any sort of information about what it takes to live outside. So every time you go outside, you're like, I twist my ankle every time I walk on something bumpy. It's like, yes, because it's like when you don't spend a lot of time developing the gait patterns and the awareness that it takes outside, then it becomes like more dangerous to go out there. So it's this idea of, okay, well, we need, just like seedlings, this hardening off phase. Like, we need to better strengthen our bodies in slow doses, just like you do with a plant, until it can be outside successfully, because in the end, it just opens up opportunities. Like, I think we've all experienced what only being inside feels like. But there are many people who are only inside for other reasons. That is, they can't withstand what's happening outside. It's too discomforting. So I do like to help transition people to not just be generally fit inside, but to be fit for outside. Because what they find with trees is, even trees or plants that live inside all the time, they don't thrive either, because plants or living things are built for outside. It's where they come from. There's nutrients you can only find outside. Like, there's not a supplement for everything in the entire world, like, that we can just bring to ourselves sitting inside. Like, we really do need to be outside and moving. But fully recognizing that, like I said, if you've been decades in the greenhouse, you need some sort of hardening off program. Hardening off is what it's called when you take plants and, take them through those stages. So that's what I like to do. You could even think of sustainable plank as like, I'm going to make my body more suitable for handling all these different loads. It's that same process, which is like, watch what your body is doing, how to learn how to read the angles and shapes of your body, to be like, oh, that's not just that my ankle wobbles when I stand on one leg. My thigh's rotating in. Like, I'm doing this to be able to use this one small, strong area. So once you can read your own body better, once you can read what your body is telling you better, then you can be in, I think, a better conversation with it. It's like, I see you keep saying that same thing. Let me show you some other thing here that you can try in this situation, a different language, a different way of expressing yourself.
Nice. Well, that's perfect about talking about outside, and this is as an inspiration for everyone to get outdoors this weekend, which is the National Get Outdoors Day, Saturday. So I want to thank you, Katy, for inspiring us and telling us more about our own bodies, because I know that I have a hard time just listening to my body, even as an instructor. So thank you, Katy, and thanks everyone who is joining us live. And we'll see you in November. All right.
Yeah. Thanks
so
everyone.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.